Welcome to another video. I'm going to show you what I've done to repair my outriggers. So there was rust around here, and as you can see right now, it's fixed. So I'm just going to show you the process. I hope you enjoy it, and let's get started. So here I'm removing some of the polyurethane adhesive that glues the bottom of the outriggers to the fiberglass of the car. Now, since the outriggers have rusted, I could remove the metal easily, but the polyurethane adhesive was still there, and it was quite challenging to remove. As you can see, I'm even trying to prise it off using a hammer with a screwdriver. And even though I've removed quite a bit of it, there was some bits that I just was unable to remove all of it. Either way, that's pretty much what you see in this part of the footage now. The next thing that I did after I did that was that I realized that I needed a better access to get to see what was wrong with the outriggers and how far the rust went through. So I had to cut a bit of the fiberglass around there in order to see how far the rust went through, and then be able to start rebuilding the outrigger from the right place. And I was actually lucky on my first cut, because I managed to cut it just a little bit above where the rust stopped. And yeah, I'm just trying to remove all of the polyurethane that was also holding that together now. So as you can see, I've also used my Dremel to try to remove as much of the rust as possible. Now, the process was extremely slow. However, because of the location of the edge of the outrigger, I actually had no choice but to use the Dremel. Many of these locations are just too difficult to access with an angle grinder, so I just used a Dremel. But you will see a little bit later on in the footage that I also use the angle grinder whenever I had the opportunity to. And sometimes I started off with a Dremel, got a bit annoyed about it, and tried to force the use of the angle grinder using some sanding discs. So yeah, the progress was extremely slow, and even though I used the angle grinder as much as possible, I spent many hours with the Dremel trying to remove rust. So now I'm just going to cut off to further down in the footage, as I've got many hours of myself just removing rust. And here, as you can see, after I figured out more or less where the rust was ending, I could then start defining where I would be doing my cuts to remove the metal completely. And I tried to do just a notch using the angle grinder, and then finish off using the Dremel. And the reason why I did it this way, it's because there's fiberglass behind the metal, and I did not want to cut into the fiberglass, so I just removed a fair amount of the metal using the angle grinder, and then finished it off using the Dremel in order to not damage any of the fiberglass. And as you can see here, the metal is coming out, and I also have now probably a couple of hours of footage of trying to remove the polyurethane adhesive that holds the metal together with the fiberglass originally. Now here you get a bit of footage where I will show you the metal piece that I've removed and how rusty it is. I was actually talking to the camera there, but there wasn't actually any value in that footage. And then I just continued chopping off metal that was rusted. We're now underneath the car. The camera is in the place where the fuel tank stands. The fuel tank has been removed, and that's a story for another day. We can see here this hole is where the fuel tank strap was holding on to. And this is also the same area that from the opposite side we just removed the bracket of rusted part of the structure of the car. And we know that the outrigger is going to be more or less somewhere around this area, and we need to get a view of it to inspect it and weld and remove the rust and everything. So I'm going to cut a window here to get a good view of what's going on, and then move out from there. And here I'm using my oscillating multi-tool with a blade, a circular or a half moon blade, to cut the fiberglass out, in order to then inspect what the outrigger looks like. Okay, so it's nowhere near as bad as it looks from the opposite side, which is good, but there is still a need for some work here. So at this point I just grabbed my Dremel again with my metal cutting disc, I believe, and I started trying to figure out, prodding about and trying to figure out where does the rust end and the metal start. And I was also trying to use it just as a tool to sand out and to scrape out the rust. Now, as you can see, I've also tried to use what's the name of that thing? A screwdriver to remove the heavier rust, and you can start to see holes being pierced through in the rust with my screwdriver. So I got a good idea of what was going on by prodding about with a screwdriver, and then I started to try to remove the rusted areas. At one point in here, I realized that I really couldn't continue working with such a small hole, and you will see in a minute that I have extended the size of that hole once I realized that I needed to access further to the left. And here you can see me extending the cut using the same multi-tool with the oscillating blade. And then after doing that, I'll just have to clean up a bit and then continue removing all of the metal, all of the rust, and trying to remove as much of the polyurethane adhesive as well. So this was an extremely time-consuming task, mostly because of difficulty with access. So I've removed as much rust as I can without damaging fiberglass that is near edges. Let me start by explaining why am I limiting the cutting on fiberglass. Every single time that the fiberglass does a ridge or an edge, it kind of works as structural reinforcement. These edges here make a very strong surface if you have an impact from the sides, at their ends. And the reality is that the reason these cars passed their crash tests back in the late 80s and the 90s, it's because the fiberglass was also part of the structure of the car, giving them rigidity. The metal is the big thing, but the fiberglass does help. So I am not going to cut any kind of corner or edge in the fiberglass because I am not confident about my skill with fiberglassing. In fact, this is the second time I'm going to fiberglass something, and I'm just going to stick to straight surfaces, which are not difficult to do, and they have less structural value. So that is also the reason why I can't take more metal out of here, because I simply can't access anything further back. I have used the Dremel now, as you've seen, and removed all of the rust that I can. Ideally, I would be actually removing more metal, but the access is so difficult that I'm not going to risk damaging fiberglass in order to get to more metal. There is no visible rust anymore. I'm going to just weld Zintac plates to reinforce everything and then put the fiberglass back. And we'll get going with this. And by the end of this I will have the rear outrigger reinforced and all of the support for the seatbelt anchor in place so that I don't get an MOT failure. So there's really nothing else to say. Just wish me luck, and just keep in mind that this is a log of what I've done in my car. I'm not telling you how to do it in your car, since to be honest I'm just figuring it out as I go along. But the next step is just to trim this piece of Zintac to the correct shape and cut it on the correct size and figure out how to weld this. So wish me luck. So I got my piece of metal here. I've now folded it in at the edge to give it extra rigidity, and I'm going to figure a way to slot it in, mark whatever cuts I need to do. I may need to shorten it. I probably need to definitely line up that cut, and we'll just proceed and see how it goes. So at this point I was just trying to figure out how to slot that piece of metal in place, take a couple of measurements as you can see from the ruler there, and just figure a way to put the metal in there and then try to figure out how to weld it together. I've now trimmed a little bit more off the top, and let's have another go. So now that this fits, I've come to the conclusion that this lip is a little bit too long, but thanks to the shape of the fiberglass itself, I don't need to cut it, I just need to fold it back in a U shape, which continues its rigidity anyway. So I'm just going to clean up a little bit of this and fold this into a U shape. Let's find out if that is angled enough. And as you can see, I managed to slide the piece of metal just there, just fine, but I still wanted to bend it a little bit further, so I went back to the workbench and I, shaped it a little bit more. You can see the spark, so there's a cuts here and there. I'm just trying to get that piece of metal to a shape that will be the easiest for myself to weld, while keeping the structural integrity that I want to give it by welding new metal. Now at this point you can see I'm actually putting some polyurethane glue now, and the reason will become apparent later on once I explain it in the footage. But what I've done is put the polyurethane adhesive in and clamp the metal in place, and you can see I used some braces to spread the load. And of course I have a bit of wood, I believe, on the opposite side so that the clamp is not pushing directly onto the fiberglass, since I want to minimize the risk of damaging fiberglass. So at this point I have my polyurethane glue, and I have my other metal stripe which was done off the camera, and I'm just trying to drill a hole for my second metal bit that is on the rear behind, close to the seatbelt anchor, and I'm just drilling a hole through it and putting a nut and a bolt through it to also push it against the polyurethane, as you can see from here. So it's been a couple of days. I have given it plenty of time for the sealant to dry, and now it's just a matter of starting to weld everything. Now, I know that ideally I would be welding everything first and then putting the sealing, but you can see from the area around here that it's just not possible to put sealant to glue the fiberglass to the metal after we have welded things. So we have to do things the other way around. So without any further ado, let's just continue and get this welding done. And here all you see from the footage is just my MIG welding, just putting everything together, tacking everything together with the MIG welder, and hopefully I wasn't letting it get too hot, so it was still actually having enough penetration. And you see, after doing the initial tacks, I'm actually trying to run beads, very, very small beads, and I'm being a bit careful over there in that specific area because there is polyurethane adhesive behind, so I was trying not to get things too hot, where in other areas I was not very concerned about it, like the area that I'm welding right now. So I think you guys get the idea of what was happening, so I'm just going to skip forward to the next stage. Right, as far as I can see around here, I can run another bead around here in the bottom, and I can run another bead around there. But as far as I can see, all I have to do now is just grind off all of this excess weld and then re-inspect everything. But yeah, so I had the settings wrong in the beginning of the weld, and I only realized it quite late. So once I fixed the settings, I went through a few bits over other bits, and yeah, I don't really know if the weld is strong or not, but after grinding everything it will be obvious. So I'm going to give it 10 minutes to cool down, then grind off all of the excess, inspect, and then we'll find out how it goes. And here I am, just grinding all of the excess of the welds and skipping forward. Okay, so here we can see that most of that weld wasn't good, which was expected because I had the wrong settings. So there seems to be a good weld there maybe, and here. Here is definitely a good weld because you can't see anything between. You see the change in the color of the metal, but you don't actually see where the lip is. Everywhere else you can see a black ridge, which means that it didn't actually penetrate through. So I'm going to redo all of this now with the welding machine in the right settings. And all around here I can't grind it, but I'm not confident about it. So what I'm going to use is a stick welding. By stick welding the penetration is much higher, and that will just penetrate and fill in the hole and glue the two, well, weld the two pieces of metal together. And I'm going to do the same around here as well. The reason I don't stick weld I don't start by stick welding, it's because stick welding has so much penetration that it usually blows through. And I've not mastered the technique enough to actually do fine metal stick welding. So I'm gonna fill this in again and then stick weld around here and here, and also fill this a bit because it's not quite welded together right either. So it's just basically having another go at the same task because I didn't do well the first time. And now you guys can enjoy what, about 20 seconds of welding in the car. So just doing it again with correct settings in the MIG welder. And as you can see, I was just covering, everything around. Okay, so things are not going according to plan. I am failing to find the right level of penetration with the welding machine, and I've just ended up building up metal that I am pretty sure is not really gluing or welding the two pieces of metal together. What I'm going to try to do is, because since I have more metal now and I still have my electrode on the chassis side of the car, I'm going to try to use my stick welder to get the penetration and just fuse the remaining metal that is building up thickness. So we'll see how it works. It could be one step forward, two steps back situation, but I have done this in the past with some success, and since the MIG machine is just not contributing to my success today, I'm gonna see if the arc welder will do it. So yeah, it's worth keeping in mind that this is just a different approach towards welding, as my stick machine is something that I can stick weld thicker things easier than I can MIG weld thin things. And as you can see, sometimes fire was being caught and I was just putting it off with my glove and waiting and giving it a bit of time. But you can clearly see how much hotter when arc welding is compared to MIG welding. And this will also give me a better, stronger weld. Okay, so far no car on fire, plenty of fires but no real fire. Something's a bit too hot over there, but it's smoking but there's no blaze, so I'll just keep an eye on it.
You can't see it from the camera, but I do have a wind stream, a fan blowing out the fumes, even though I'm too close around here, but they are being pushed out. So I'm just gonna get rid of that slack, grind that, find out if my attempt with the stick welder did anything. I'm fairly confident that this area here was good, and around here is probably welded as well, and this area I also think that it's all sticking together fine, and some of these areas around here as well. You could see from the video that I did blow a couple of holes, but nothing major. Just notice that there is a hole in there, but I will be leaving that if everything else is stuck together properly. So I'm just gonna start grinding and see how it turned out.
So here I gotta apologize for the bad positioning of the camera and all of the screen glare, but as you can see I was just grinding the excess slag to inspect the welds again.
So here's the thing. I'm confident that this is enough of a weld to keep everything together. There is no wobbling between the two sides, so there is enough weld to keep everything together. I have a bit of straightening there, and the most important part is this weld that is really strong, and these here, which are definitely keeping all of this strong. So this is reinforcing the seatbelt anchor, and I'm safe driving the car. Now, to be honest, this rust that I had here before wasn't really going to stop the seatbelt from protecting me, but you know, it's an MOT failure, and this way there's no rust, and I can drive safely. Now, before continuing, I need to, well, not before continuing, before painting all of this with anti-rust paint, what I am going to do is move to the back and weld the back side of this as well. So everything is set up now. Not sure if you can see me from that camera. The glue or the sealant should be holding this in place, so I can remove this, and all I have to do is put a bead of weld to put these two pieces together along that edge and then along that corner there, which is already actually sticking together because the weld from the opposite side went through. I have fume extraction going on, as you can hear from the background. I have a fan blowing towards my back, that direction, and well, we'll just see what I can do with this. The chances of getting fiberglass burned in this weld are very minimal, and really the only problem I have is space. So I'm gonna see what I can do, the best I can do, and put some welding goggles on top of these goggles and just go as we can go.
Now it's worth noting that the glasses that I'm wearing there have a small camera in the middle. However, the footage of that camera was terrible, and I was actually wearing the glasses together with a welding mask, and once I finished the job and I looked at the footage, it was just completely pointless to use it. Anyway, as you can see here, I was just using my MIG welding machine to weld the piece of metal in and reinforce the outrigger. So, moving forward...
This is good enough. This is definitely structural enough. Yep, nothing is moving here, so I'm happy with that. Give it 10 minutes to dry and hammer it. Hammer it paint will protect it against the rust for the foreseeable future. In the meanwhile, the other side, I can actually start painting it right now because it's already dry. It's already cold. Right, now we're back onto the front of the car just to start painting. And you know, nothing major here. Things seem to be pretty sturdy, so I'm happy with these welds. They're not very good looking welds, but no one's gonna see them. So all I have to do now is just make sure that all of this is as protected against rust as I can make it.
And here I'm just painting the outrigger behind the passenger side, and here on the welding, on the jacking point, just putting the paint in.
The final thing to do is just in the back to figure out how am I going to cover that hole. I still haven't decided yet. I took 2 pieces of fiberglass from there. I'm thinking that possibly I could just use a polyurethane sealant and put everything back together. That would also allow me some access for future inspections. Or I can fabricate something new. I've got this kit. It's a Fiberglass Repair Kit. I haven't opened it yet, but it should have everything that I need in order to... funny, my GT4 is in a... It's funny that they actually picked my other car to put on on the labeling, because that car doesn't have any fiberglass. Anyway, I got a kit. I can build something out of fiberglass to cover it, or I can cover it on spot, which was it's my intention right now. But I need to first do a bit of research, because I may just put back the same piece of fiberglass with polyurethane glue, and we will get back to that later on in the video. Right, I've done the second coating of Amerit, and everything is sturdy, so I'm ready to cover this up. And I've decided to use polyurethane sealant, just like everything else in the car is, because there's no structural value here, and it's just a quick and easy way to put things back together. But because I got 2 cuts of fiberglass, I'm going to probably only put one glued in today, and then glue the other one tomorrow. It all depends on how well it sticks. If it sticks well enough, I'll just put the second one, but we'll see how it goes.
And here, as you can see, I was just very carefully trying to aim the polyurethane gun and position the fiberglass back into place, and then glue it by the edges instead of trying to build up any kind of pyramids to glue it from. I just wanted to actually slot it exactly where it was originally, and I actually am very happy with the end result, which was just a flush gluing with, you know, a bit of black polyurethane glue around.
So I don't know if this is it or not, but in case this dries out and it's in place, that will be it for this video, I guess. So now I know that my rear outrigger is solid. It's not a pretty weld, but it's a solid weld, both on this side and the other side of the passenger. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.